We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 23a. On the previous summit, there was a machlokas between Rabba and Rava, both in terms of siman ha'asui lidares, that's a siman that's going to be trampled, and also in terms of makom, in terms of location, whether that's considered to be a siman. And Rabba holds that both siman ha'asui lidares and makom are not considered to be a siman, and Rava holds siman ha'asui lidares and makom are considered to be a siman. And the Gemara is dealing with a brisa. The brisa on the previous summit, it deals with bundles of grain, and it also deals with alumos, which are these larger sheaves. By bundles of grain, there's a distinction made in the brisa between Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. In Rishus HaYachid is no telomachers, you have to announce it. In Rishus HaRabim, the person is allowed to keep it if he finds these bundles of grain. When it comes to alumos, when it comes to the larger sheaves, it doesn't matter if it's Rishus HaRabim or Rishus HaYachid, it's always no telomachers, the person always has to announce it. And so the Gemara is explaining the brisa according to Rabba, and then the Gemara is going to explain the brisa according to Rava. And again, the way that Rabba is going to explain the brisa is that the brisa is dealing with the issue of siman ha'asui lidares. And so therefore, in Rishus HaRabim, dimidrasa, in Rishus HaRabim, if it's there, it's going to get trampled, and therefore in Rishus HaRabim, it is not considered to be a siman according to Rabba. Again, siman ha'asui lidares is not a siman according to Rabba. As Rashi says, dimidrasa of a siman ha'asui lidaresu, it's a siman ha'asui lidares. And so therefore, harelu shalo, that's why he keeps it in Rishus HaRabim. But Rishus HaYachid, but if it's in Rishus HaYachid, so it's not going to be trampled, so no telo machers. Then he takes it and he announces it to lo midrasa because it is not going to be trampled. V'alumos, and when it comes to the larger sheaves, bein Rishus HaRabim uvein Rishus HaYachid, whether it's Rishus HaRabim or Rishus HaYachid, no telo machers, he has to take it and announce it. Kevin de gabehen lo midrasa, since it sticks up, it protrudes, so therefore it's not going to be trampled, and that's why there's a distinction between the bundles of grain and the alumos. And the Gemara continues, V'Rava mitaretz l'taim, and Rava will explain the brisa according to his opinion, but makom, that the brisa is dealing with the issue of makom being a siman, and so therefore we make the distinction as follows: krichos b'Rishus HaRabim, when it comes to bundles of grain in Rishus HaRabim, harei l'shalo, so he can keep those de minshatva because they roll around, they're not in the same makom anymore, so makom cannot be a siman. B'Rishus HaYachid chayav l'hachers, but if it's in Rishus HaYachid, then he's chayav to announce it, de lo minshatva, because it's not rolling around. V'alumos, but when it comes to the sheaves, bein Rishus HaRabim uvein Rishus HaYachid, whether we're talking about Rishus HaRabim or Rishus HaYachid, no telo machers, he takes it and announces it, kaven de yakiri, since it's heavy, lo min shatva, so it's not going to roll around, and so therefore makom is going to be a siman both in Rishus HaRabim and Rishus HaYachid when it comes to alumos. And Rashi explains the min shatva is galgil baraglei adam uvehem, it gets rolled around by the feet of the people and the animals. Ve'ina nimsis b'makom shenaf l'tchil, it's not going to be found in the same place where it originally fell. The yakiri means kavedos, again the yakiri means that it's heavy. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come and hear the following proof from our Mishnah, Ki kara shel nachdom, by the loaves of a baker, hareelu shelo, he keeps those if he finds them. Hashal balabayis chayav lahachris, so the Gemara infers from the Mishnah that if it would be of a private individual, of a balabayis, so then he's chayav to announce them. And the Gemara says, shel balabayis my time, and now if it's of a balabayis, what's the reason he has to announce it? Kevan de ispu siman, because there's a siman. The meida yediyah rifta de inish, because it's known the bread of a particular person, who it belongs to. Each bread was made differently when it was made by a balabayis. Veloshna Rishus HaRabim, veloshna Rishus HaYachid. It doesn't matter if it's a public domain, it doesn't matter if it's a private domain. No telo machers, he takes it and announces it. So Alma, so we see from the Mishnah, siman ha'asuli dares have a siman, that if you have a siman that's going to be trampled, like over here, even in Rishus HaRabim, that is considered to be a siman. Tiyufta de Rabba, should we say that this is a refutation of Rabba? And the Gemara continues, Amar lach Rabba, Rabba will say to you, Hasam hainu time, over there, the reason is mishum de'ein ma'avir ala ochlin, because a person is not supposed to pass over food, which Rashi will explain, and so therefore there is no concern that it's going to be trampled, that the loaves of bread will be trampled in Rishus HaRabim. But the Gemara says, Vayika Nachrim, but what about the non-Jews who will trample over the bread? The Gemara says, Nachrim chayshi l'chshafim, the non-Jews are concerned with witchcraft. The Gemara says, Vayika behemu klavim, but what about the domesticated animals and the dogs? They're going to trample on the bread. And the Gemara says, Bi'asr de lo shchichi behemu klavim, we're talking about an area where it's not common to have domesticated animals and dogs. And Rashi explains, Hashal balabayis chayav l'hachris, again we made an inference from the Mishnah that if the loaves belong to a balabayis, one would need to announce them. Now, even though loaves of balabayis are actually dealt with explicitly in the Mishnah coming up, and so therefore, why do we need to make an inference from the Reisha of the Mishnah? And Rashi says, since we asked a question from the Reisha, from the beginning of the Mishnah, from the case of bundles in Rishus HaRabim, we asked from there a question on Rava, so nakanami laos Tosfei l'Rabba miduki the Reisha. So we're dealing with the Reisha of the Mishnah now. So we ask a question on Rabba also from an inference from the Reisha of the Mishnah. Then the Gemara said, Ein ma'avirin ala ochlin. Rashi explains what that means. Hamotzi ochlin b'derech. If somebody finds food on the road, Ein rashay lavor aleim ulanichav sham. You can't just pass by and leave it there. Hilgach lo nidrasu. Therefore, it's not going to get trampled. Shamisha mitzon rishon higbian, because the first person who finds it is going to pick it up. And Rashi notes, Ein ma'avirin ala ochlin lav loshan drisu. It doesn't mean to say that you can't trample on food. That's not what Ein ma'avirin means. Rather, it means what Rashi explained. You can't pass by. Elakamo Ein ma'avirin ala mitzvahs. It's more like the language of Ein ma'avirin ala mitzvah, says Rashi. Chayshi l'chshafim. Then the Gemara said that the non-Jews are concerned with witchcraft. Sevurim shemachmas kshafim hunchu l'sham. The idea is that they think that it was placed there for purposes of witchcraft, kedei lahachshil hadorsam aleim, to cause stumbling block for those who are going to trample on it. Unhinami dein magbinos, and granted they don't pick it up. Miulo darsi alein mishum kshafim. Nevertheless, they're not going to actually trample on it, again because of a concern of witchcraft. And the Gemara continues, Lema ketanoi, let us say that this is a machlokas tanoim, and this is from our Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol davar sheyesh bo shinoi, anything that's unique, that's different, chayiv lahachris, the person has to announce, again, because that's like a siman, it's a distinguishing mark. Keitzad, how so? Motza, eagle of a socho cheres, let's say the person finds a round cake of pressed figs, and inside of it is earthenware, kikor of a socho mos, a loaf, and inside of it is money, that's something with a shinoi. And so in such a situation, you'd be chayiv to announce it according to Rabbi Yehuda. And the Gemara says, Mechlal the Tanakama Sover, that implies that the Tanakama holds, Harei Lushalo, that in all of these cases, he actually keeps the item, he doesn't have to announce it. It sounds like a machlukas tanoim when we're talking about something with a shinoi. And so the Gemara now analyzes this machlukas tanoim. The Gemara says, Savrua, right now we think, the Kuli Alma Siman Haba Meil of Havisimin. First of all, everybody holds a siman that could have come on its own. It's possible, for example, that the cheres just happened to fall into the loaf. Maybe it wasn't placed there as a siman. So everybody agrees in such a situation, a siman Haba Meilov is still considered a siman. Uma'avirin ala ochlin, and also everybody agrees you're allowed to pass by food. So it's possible people just walked by, and it's possible it would get trampled. And so therefore, my lav is it not? But siman ha'asali daris kamiflagi, they're arguing about exactly this issue. Siman ha'asali daris, is that a machlokas? Is that a siman or not? Mar savar lo have a siman. One holds that it is not considered to be a siman, meaning that would be the opinion of the Tanakam. It is not considered to be a siman. That's why he can keep it. Umar savar, and Rabbi Yehuda holds have a siman, that it is considered a siman, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda says chayiv lahachris. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rava. Rav Zvid says in the name of Rava, if you think that the Tanakama holds a siman that's going to be trampled is not a siman, and also the Tanakama holds that you're allowed to pass by food, so then Kikaros shel Balabayis b'Rishos Haravim, when it comes to the loaves of a private individual in Rishos Haravim, Amai Machras, why do you announce those? That would be a problem to announce, because again, a siman ha'asali is not a siman, and it's going to get trampled. And so that can't be the explanation. Elo Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rava. Rather, Rav Zvid says in the name of Rava, this is how you understand the machlokas about shinoi in the Mishnah. To kuli alma savri siman ha'asili dares havi siman. Everybody agrees a siman that's going to be trampled is a siman. Again, that's in accordance with Rava. This is an answer in the name of Rava. Everybody holds it is a siman. Uma'avir na'lo ochlan, and everybody holds you can pass by food, and therefore it is going to get trampled, but that's still considered a siman. And so therefore, why would it be, if it's still considered a siman, why would it be hare'elu shalo according to the Tanakama? V'hacha b'siman haba me'elav kamiflagi. They're arguing about a siman that can come on its own. The Tanakama savar siman haba me'elav lo have a siman. The Tanakama holds a siman that can come on its own is not a siman. That's why the person keeps it. For Rabbi Yehuda savar have a siman. Rabbi Yehuda holds that it is a siman, and that's why it's announced. And that's a good answer for Rava. What about Rabba? For Rabba Amar Lach, Rabba will say to you, the kuli alma siman asali daris lo have a siman. Everybody agrees on the contrary, that a siman that's going to be trampled is not a siman. Ve'ein ma'avir nal ochlin. You're not allowed to pass up food, and therefore it's not going to be trampled in this case. V'hacha b'siman haba me'elav kamiflagi. And again, they're just arguing about a siman that can come on its own. Tanakama savar lo have a siman. The Tanakama holds it's not a siman. For Rabbi Yehuda savar have a siman, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that it is a siman. The Gemara says, Ika de'amri, there are those that say a different version of the above discussion. Savrua, that everybody thinks initially, the kuli alma siman haba me'elav have a siman, that everybody agrees a siman that can come on its own is a siman. The siman ha'asali dares lo have a siman, and a siman that is going to be trampled is not a siman. And my lav b'ma'avir nalo ochlan kamiflagi. And aren't they arguing about whether you can pass up food or or not, essentially whether it will be trampled or not. Mar Savar Ma'avir, and one says one can pass up the food, Umar Savar Ein Ma'avir, and the other one says one cannot pass by the food, and so the machlokas is whether it will be trampled or not. And the Gemara says to that, Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rava, again, Rav Zvid says in the name of Rava, if you think the Tanakama holds, Siman ha'asli lidaris lo have siman, that if a siman is going to be trampled, it's not a siman, Uma'avir na lo ochlin, and you're allowed to pass up food, so then kikar shal balabayis b'rishos harabim, if you have the kikaros of a private individual, the loaves of a private individual in the public domain, amay machras, why would you announce those loaves? Doesn't make sense. It's going to be a problem of siman ha'asli lidaris, it's going to be a problem that it's trampled. Elamar Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rava, so again, Rav Zvid says in the name of Rava, to kuli alma savri siman ha'asli lidaris have a siman. Everybody agrees a siman that's going to be trampled is a siman, Uma'avir na lo ochlin, and one can pass by food, but it doesn't matter, because it's still a siman, even if it's going to be trampled. V'hacha b'siman haba meil of kamifilgi, and here they're arguing about a siman that could have come on its own. The Tanakama savar siman haba meil of lo have a siman. The Tanakama holds a siman that could come on its own is not a siman. For Rabbi Yehuda savar have a siman. Rabbi Yehuda holds that it is a siman, and that's the basis of the machlokas according to Rava. For Rabba Amarlach, and Rabba will say to you, the kuliyama siman ha'asli daris lo have a siman. Everybody agrees a siman that's going to be trampled is not a siman. Ve'ein ma'avir na lo ochlin, and you can't pass by food, and therefore it won't be trampled in this situation anyhow. V'hacha b'siman haba meil of kamiflagi, but here they're arguing again about a siman that can come on its own. Tanakama savar siman haba meil of lo have a siman. The Tanakama holds a siman that can come on its own is not a siman. Rabbi Yehuda savar have a siman, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that it is a siman. And Rashi explains haba meil of again that can come on its own. Haroi lava meil of, meaning it's able, it could have happened on its own. Kegon cheres pamim shenofel beagle. Sometimes the earthenware would fall in the round cake of pressed figs. So it's a question whether that's a siman. Have a siman. One opinion says it is a siman. Damrin and l'shem siman nasnu sham, because we say it was placed there for the purpose of being a siman. V'lo nafal meil, if we assume it didn't just fall there on its own. V'davar sheyesh bo siman, it's considered something with a siman. V'afilu hachi pligi rabbanan, but nevertheless the rabbanan argue. V'amri hareilu shalo, they say the person can keep it mishum dekasavri ma'avir nalo ochlin, because they hold that you can pass by food. V'havale siman ha'asli lidaris, and therefore it's a siman that is going to be trampled. And Rashi also says ika de'amri savru. Again, there was another version of the discussion, and according to that version, says Rashi, v'chi itmar leme ketanoi. According to that version, when the Gemara was suggesting that it's a machlokas tanoim in the Mishnah, a'ein ma'avir nalo ochlin itmar. We mean to say there's a machlokas tanoim in terms of whether you're not allowed to pass by food. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rava. Rav Zvid says in the name of Rava, Klolo di avidita, the general rule by lost objects, Kevan do Amar Vaila l'chisarn kis. Once the owner says, woe is to me that I've lost money, miyayish le mina, that's considered to be that he has despaired from the lost item. V'yam Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rava, and Rav Zvid says in the name of Rava, Hilchasa, the halacha is, Krichos b'rishas harabim, if there's bundles of grain in rishas harabim, hareilu shalo, the person can keep it. B'rishas hayachid, and if the bundle of grain is in rishas hayachid, it depends. Iderech nefila hareilu shalo. If it looks like it just fell there, then he can keep it. Iderech hanacha, but if it looks like it was placed there, so no to lo machers, then he has to take it and announce it. V'zeh b'davar shein bo siman. Now this is true in a situation where it has no siman. Avol b'davar sheyesh bo siman, but if it's something that has a siman, then lo shna b'rishas harabim v'lo shna b'rishas hayachid. It doesn't matter if we're talking about rishas harabim or rishas hayachid. Bein derech nefilu, vein derech hanacha, whether it looks like it just fell there or it looks like it was placed there. Chayiv lahachres, he does have to announce it. And Rashi explains, Hilchas of the halacha is Krichos b'rishas harabim v'chulu. Again, if you have bundles of grain in rishas harabim, so then he can keep those. Kedemuki la b'shein bo siman, as we're going to say, we're talking about bundles of grain without a siman. But b'rishas hayachid, if it's in rishas hayachid, iderech nefila harei l'shalo. If it looks like it just fell there, so then he could keep it. Delekala meimar makam have a siman, because then you can't say that the location is a siman. Tahalo yada hechanafal mine, the guy has no idea where it fell from. But iderech hinuach, but if it looks like it was placed there, no to lo machres makam, so then he takes it and announces the location. He shouldn't just leave it there, because we're afraid that maybe a non-Jew will find it, and take it. Maybe the owner forgot about them, so that's why, again, if it's derech hinuach, he can announce it and he can use the makom essentially as the siman. But if you're talking about something that has a siman, so then we say it doesn't matter if it's rishas harabim or rishas hayachid, it doesn't matter if it fell there or was placed there, he has to announce it. And Rashi explains for that, Rava l'taime, Rava here is following his opinion. The Amar siman ha'asli daris have a siman. He says that a siman, even if it will be trampled, is considered to be a siman. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Gimel Amud Beis.